Hello, my name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. So we're going to continue our conversation on foils. Today we're going to talk about protagonist foils. And so the format will be a bit different because I'm going to actually go through the examples for you with the identity story, as you can see here. Now, if you remember that foils are characters who give the audience an opportunity to see different specific aspects of our protagonist or antagonist. So foils for the protagonist are called protagonist foils. Foils for the antagonist are called antagonist foils. So one of the main things with foils is being very specific about what aspect of the character that you're representing. And for this, we want to go back to our guiding principles. So, of course, you can remember what those are: theme, purpose, expectation, logline. But the one that we're going to specifically deal with as far as aspects are concerned is the theme of the story, because this helps to tie together everything that we need concerning the message. And it allows a message to be able to speak for itself with everything having this kind of one word underpinning. Remember, the reason why we want our theme to be one word is so that it's accessible to everyone, not just our audience members, but also our creative team and everyone who is involved in the entire process. So, what I have done and what we're going to do is I've created a little grid here, if you will. Step out of the way of it so that you can see it, because we're going to talk about character and then the theme aspect. So as we talked about before, and I'll go over the guiding principles for our identity story. The theme, of course, is identity, and I'm going to go ahead and read it because why not? So the purpose is to encourage the responsibility of self-definition. And then the expectation is the affirmation of the individual strengthens the community. So keeping all of that in mind, I want to select aspects of identity, which is to say sub-themes, you could say, that will be kind of the underpinning in which we will use to have a discussion about identity and its role and who these characters are. So I've actually selected those, of course, already, because you want to know that before you start writing, because you want to build the strongest characters. Remember, you're going to be creating a character creation sheet or a pivotal character worksheet for each one of your foils, and that's so you can get information like this down, so that when the characters have their conversations, it's very specific what they're talking about. And their point of view on what they're talking about is also specific. So let's take a look at if you remember from the character creation sheet for Dravan, the first community that he had a responsibility to was his family, which is to say the foil was Maxwell. So Maxwell will have an aspect of identity. Let me grab. There we go, back behind me. So I'm going to list Maxwell here, and there's no real right or wrong way to do this, but you want to make sure that your notes are clear, however you're doing it. So I'm going to write Maxwell here, right? Maxwell, and then his theme. So for Maxwell's theme, I actually selected anonymity. For those of you who don't know what anonymity means, it's about something that is anonymous. Basically, something that is not remarkable or appears to be not remarkable in any form or fashion. And I wanted to talk about anonymity because we have a lot of people who come here who are like Maxwell, who come to not just our country, but lots of countries. They're immigrants. And they go through the process of becoming citizens because Maxwell, in my story, is a naturalized citizen. But they still suffer from the fact that there are a lot of people who would really rather them not exist, or at least be seen and not heard. So I wanted to discuss the effects of anonymity. And that's also not to say, because this particular character, Maxwell, he actually revels in his anonymity because it allows him to basically do what he wants to do without anybody really paying attention to him. So he not only revels in that, but he cultivates it. So anonymity is the first one. The next character is Sandy. Now, if you remember, Sandy is Drayvon's publicist, right? I don't know why I was about to write Maxwell again. She's his publicist and part-time manager, basically his surrogate mother, if you will, or the closest thing that he has to one, Sandy. So with Sandy, we will actually get privacy. So with her, we're going to get a chance to discuss something, the subset of privacy under identity. And of course, since she's his publicist, publicists are all about creating this persona, trying to get trying to get good attention for their clients, getting them the opportunity to get out in front of people and get opportunities, basically. Let's see. Did I spell that right? I did. Okay, so privacy. So we're going to discuss that. Of course, as I've already said in the story, because of the things that have happened to Drayvon, him being a child star and trying to manage that, and the affairs and the molestation, all of that, this relationship is not so good. So, but I still wanted to have an opportunity to have a discussion about exactly what that means. The third community is Dawson, and this Dawson is the deaf friend with benefits, I guess you could say, that Drayvon has cultivated. Dawson. Okay. And with Dawson, and I'm going to erase those, and I'll find out in a minute. With Dawson, the theme aspect that we're going to talk about with him is sexual expression. So that's an easy one, obviously. Drayvon is your unidentified, unaligned bisexual person. So the freedom to express who he is, obviously he was in a situation where as a child he was taken advantage of, but then as he grew as an adult, he was able to more define himself along the lines of what he wanted to define himself as, not as what anybody else wanted to define him as. So through Dawson, his relationship with Dawson, we're going to get an opportunity to discuss this portion of it as well. Now, how many, and we'll talk more about this in the next unit, which is Story Blueprint, but as to how many foils you need and communities that you need for your story, it really depends on the length of your story. I am writing an epic story, but I'm starting with the adventure. So when I say epic, well, when I say adventure, from conventional standard, I'm talking about something that is a movie length, so a 90-minute movie. So I'm planning on writing 4 90-minute movies about this character and his journey through that time. So in a movie, so in an adventure, I would say you would need 3 to 6 foils in 3 to 6 communities. And the reason for that is, of course, in this story, you have the 3 communities that you use to introduce your character. But then we have Dravon going across the pond to Africa. And so he's not going to have the same access to resources that he has here in America. So he's going to need to create new foils. He's going to need to create new relationships in order to not only attain the physical goal that he's trying to attain, his ambition, but also in order to overcome his stumbling blocks so that he can get to his ambition. Remember that it's about solving the internal issue so that you can solve the outward problem. In this case, my story is going to require, at least the not the epic story, but the first story, the first movie, is going to require 5 foils. So 5 communities, 5 foils. So I'm going to go ahead and go over those, because generally, and this is what we do, whenever we build relationships, we try to build them along a familiar line. So obviously, when Dravon goes across the pond to Africa, he's going to gravitate toward people who more than likely remind him of what it's like to be home, because he's going to be completely out of his element. Now, I said 3 to 6. The reason why I say 3 to 6 is because sometimes you're able to use the same foil in the new world, if you will. And this is actually going to be just that case, because Maxwell, since he's from the country that Dravon is traveling to, will actually be the foil for that community. So they'll be a part of the family foil. And it's going to be the exact same, communities, just a different version of them, if you will. Somebody says Funhouse Mirror version. I don't so much try to get into that. You want to keep it as basic as possible, basic human interaction. He's looking for something familiar. He's completely out of sorts, out of his element. He's looking for something familiar, so he's going to find people who are familiar. So Maxwell and all of them will still discuss the same aspects of the theme. So Maxwell is still going to talk about anonymity. However, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because Maxwell, when he goes back to his home country, everybody knows him. He's part of the royal family. So it's going to be kind of flipped. Remember when we talked about the antagonist and looking at the purpose and expectation for the antagonist, it's not that it's the reverse of the protagonist, it's that it's flipped. So in this particular case, now we're going to talk about anonymity in a different way concerning Maxwell, because he's not an immigrant. Sandy. Privacy. The character that's going to reflect that for Dravon in the new country is going to be Jocasta. And I'm calling her Lady Jocasta now because that was the name that basically came to mind first. But Jocasta. So Jocasta is the mother of the children, so she's the queen. She's not the queen mother, but she is the mother of the children that Dravon is going to be teaching sign language. And of course, there's a bit of privacy that's needed when you're part of the royal family. So she basically, for the most part, runs the house. And so we're going to talk about those privacy issues through her once Dravon actually arrives on the continent. The last foil that we'll need is Prince James. So Prince James is the eldest son, Jocasta's eldest son, and the eldest son of the king. And so we're going to talk about sexual expression as far as he is concerned. No, he's not like Dawson, but sexual expression and fear is what we're going to talk about. And when we get into who the king is and what the circumstances are of the story and the story blueprint, you'll have a better idea of what's going on. So we've got the identity theme as the identity, and then the different aspects and how they're represented through the characters. These characters that help establish the audience and help establish who Dravon is to the audience, and then the characters that will help further explain the new world that Dravon is in once he goes to the continent. Now, I've had to make a decision about the continent. I'll call it the continent because there are over 33 countries on the continent of Africa. And they have like 5 different climate zones. And so there's something like close to, I think it's 2,500 different ethnic groups on the continent. I have to be sensitive, not just sensitive, but culturally aware, which is to say, if I decide that I want to place this film in Ghana, for instance, I want to do the country that these characters are from is Ghana. Maxwell's from Ghana. And I have to be specific about it and say the Akan Empire, the Akan people. Okay. Or the gun people. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I have to be willing to be an expert on those cultures so that I'm not misrepresenting something from the start. And it's my responsibility as a storyteller to do that. And I don't care where the storyteller is from, what their ethnic background is from, but if you are going to represent a group of people in your story, you have an absolute responsibility to making sure that the structure of the culture of the people is correct. So I am not comfortable, and I think people know me well enough, but I am not comfortable with taking a existing culture, if you would, and doing this kind of story with it. And it's not just about being concerned about offending people. I want to actually have the time to do it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do what Stanley did. I'm going to create my own Wakanda, if you will. And so I will craft an African country that is possible to exist in this day and age with a few changes so that people don't outright just, kind of push my story to the side because it's too fantastic. There are 2 or 3 major flaws, things that wouldn't actually happen. And that's important. You as a storyteller have to be aware of those things because it impacts your message getting to the audience that it needs to get to. So I'm actually going to talk about more of that during Story Blueprint because it's more impacted there. But so if you have a movie, specifically talking about a movie or a novel, for instance, if you have a movie or a novel, it is going to be, you're going to need, I'm sorry, from 3 to 5 foils and communities, or I'm sorry, from 3 to 6 foils and communities. In my case, I have 5, and each foil or community is going to represent an aspect of the theme that's going to be discussed in the story. When we come back on the next This Is Writing, we're going to talk about your antagonist foils and how they work and how everybody interacts together. We're moving quickly, very quickly, toward our story blueprint discussion. I want to give you guys, well, you'll be able to see it. Let me give you guys the space to see this so that you can see it. Okay. My name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. This is Writing is brought to you by mjgstorycreation.com. Go to mjgstorycreation.com for details and free downloads. Turn your idea into an epic story today. I'll see you next time.